Indigenous Hands was born out of the need to bridge the communication gap between deaf children and their families, and to create early sign language access for deaf children born in isolated deaf communities. Across societies, deaf children are born in hearing families. Others become deaf in infant age, when language has hardly been formed. Several of these deaf children pass infant age with little or no access to sign language. Consequently, they grow up with poor linguistic and cognitive skills. With Indigenous Hands, all sign language varieties get the chance of being developed to a global recognition, and all signing expressions get the chance of getting into a mainstream use, especially the sign language of the immediate environment of the deaf child, which in most cases represent the most important cultural identity of the deaf child. Indigenous Hands SignApp is a product of several years of research in deaf communities in Africa, where we found many deaf children growing up without early access to sign language. But more importantly, we found out that these deaf children have minimal communication with their immediate families, which seems to impact their general cognitive skills and psychosocial well-being. With further studies, we became aware that this is not just an African problem, but a problem presenting itself in different ways across deaf communities in the world. As a result, we invented Indigenous Hands, iHands, to solve this most neglected global problem. Indigenous Hands will bridge the communication gap between deaf children and their families, improve the communicative competence of all sign language users, enhance linguistic and cognitive skills of deaf children, ensure early sign language access for all sign language users, redefine early intervention program for all children with communication challenges, create a pathway for bilingual education for all sign language users, promote, protect, and preserve indigenous and endangered signing heritages, reduce linguistic dominance and monopoly in the sign language space.
Indigenous Hands SignApp is a pedagogical system for minority and indigenous sign languages of our immediate environment. The system is divided into different lessons, each lesson representing different categories with subcategories. The sign videos are documented from different local deaf communities. Some were self-documented by the deaf signers using the only video tool available to them, cell phones. If the videos do not portray the scintillating environment that you are familiar with on the digital space, bear with us. We pride in the indigenous heritages they represent. To search for an indigenous signing variety of your country or any other country, click on Country on the home page and search for the deaf community you want to view their signs, and go to the category or lesson. However, if you do not find the name of the community you are looking for, it means that the indigenous signing systems of that community has not been documented by our team. Contact us at info@indigenous-hands.com if you would like the signing systems of your indigenous community to be documented.
Our indigenous sign languages are as old as our deaf communities, and our deaf communities have always been part of our larger diverse linguistic communities, where deaf and hearing are part of the heterogeneous cultural experience. Numerous documented historical evidence shows that deaf and hearing of our linguistic communities have always shared relatively mutual sign language experience, which is part of the larger cultural heritage of our society. Contrary to some of today's trending views, sign language experience historically has always been shared by both deaf and hearing in communities, where home signs and generally used gestures gradually find their way into the mainstream indigenous signing systems. Early sign language access and early literacy through sign language were not far-fetched in the era of indigenous signing experience. Although sign language was not yet recognized as a language at this time and was not taught in schools for the deaf or mainstream schools, it was generously used in the communities and in some communities at official meetings involving both deaf and hearing, such as the local courts. On behalf of Team Indigenous Hands, I welcome you to this unique platform, Indigenous Hands. Let's go. Enjoy the experience.